Hi, I'm Joel Friedlander from thebookdesigner.com and Book Design Templates. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this presentation is part of the Alliance of Independent Authors Self-Publishing Advice Conference. So welcome to the conference. Today we're going to be talking about book design choices. The choices that authors face in determining the kind of tools they're going to use to create their book, and this is particularly oriented to do-it-yourselfers, and then the method for how you're going to reproduce those books. So these two questions come together for many authors, and it's not surprising because it can be very confusing looking at all the different ways there are to create books. What's the best way for me? What does my book need? And obviously, what kind of books I'm producing and publishing is a key question for any author. So just to let you know a little bit about me, I have a background in direct response marketing. I worked in the book publishing industry for years. I have a blog that's been going since 2009 about book design and production and book marketing. I run several e-commerce sites. I'm a columnist for Publishers Weekly. I began my publishing journey in 1986 when I self-published my first book. And by the way, it's still in print and selling. And I love to cook and bake. Hey, why not? It's fun. And here are my sites. The Book Designer, that's my blog. And these other are e-commerce sites with tools and services to help indie authors use their time better and make more of an impact with their books. So I'm looking at these two questions. Which tools should I use to create my book? And how should I produce, and by that I mean print or publish my book for the market of people I hope to offer it to? Now, backing up for a step, although in this presentation I'm talking about book design and production, you have to realize that the answers to these questions are really implied by your marketing choices. And I know that sounds a little crazy. I mean, what does marketing have to do with what font I use? But it really is critical because, after all, when we set out to publish a book, the most important decision we have to make up front is, who am I publishing this book for? And what kind of book is it that they want to buy? If you can't answer those questions, then it's not going to make any difference what tool you use or how you produce your books. You may get lucky, you may not. But I think it's important for independent authors who are publishing their own books to actually understand that there is a market for what they're writing and that they have an opportunity to reach that market, but it's important to produce the right book. And so let's look at this. Now, I think the content of your book or the purpose to which you're going to put that book, the reason you're publishing it, really kind of determines the tool that you use to create it. You know, there are books, and I'm going to show you some later in this presentation, that really can only be created with professional quality tools. And while many other books, and perhaps the majority of books, for instance, most fiction, can be produced in many different ways with different kinds of tools because they're less demanding. So what do I mean by that? Now, looking at popular tools available to indie authors today, there are a bunch of choices. I'm going to show you 3 different ones just so you can get a feel for the overall landscape, what's happening in book production today. Now, many indie authors are novelists. They're fiction writers. Probably the most profitable part of self-publishing has become genre novels, thrillers, romances, sci-fi. And a lot of those books have moved into ebook formats. That's made it a lot easier for authors to become publishers and get their books into the market. So but on the other hand, there are many, many books that we can publish that aren't so easy. Now, these tools, for instance, this one, Pressbooks, are really largely oriented to people who write novels or narrative nonfiction. And by that I mean not structured copy. In other words, in a nonfiction book, you might have chapter headings, part openers, subheads, sub-subheads, sub-sub-subheads, and graphics, charts, call-outs, all kinds of elements in the book. And of course, every time you add an element to the book, it makes it a little bit more complicated and it takes more time. So tools like Pressbooks, and Pressbooks is a web-based book design and production facility. In other words, you pay a fee and you use their website, an account. You get an account on their website and you use that to create your book. This works really, really well for ebooks, particularly, and for very simple print books. And you can see that they're advertising that on this page. Now, Pressbooks, and I want you to pay attention to this book sample they're showing on their site. And they call this a professional book design, and it looks fine to me. You can see it has running heads. Those are the little notations at the top of the pages. It has page numbers. It has an illustration with a caption that's been dropped in and some footnotes. So there are format elements to this book, but they're all fairly simple. And that's important. Now, Pressbooks has a gallery of themes that you can pick. You can see each theme. It has a different kind of design. And these are all perfectly good-looking designs. I wouldn't be embarrassed to publish a book with any of these. You'll notice that one of them in the center there, the Andreessen theme, that's named for Mark Andreessen, actually is showing the chapter title in color. So that tells me that this is primarily oriented to ebooks, because in a print book we would never do something like just print the chapter title in color, because it would make the book very, very expensive for very little impact. Here's another type of solution. So we looked at Pressbooks, which is actually based on WordPress. That's hence its title. And that is software well known as being a blogging platform, but the geniuses over at Pressbooks have put it to use as a book creation tool. That's very cool. Now, in this case, Vellum, which is very popular, is software you download, and then you use the software to create your books. And they have a very nice interface. The site is beautiful. You can see here they're showing a print book, trying to give you, again, the feeling that you can create these beautiful books using their tool. Obviously, they also focus largely on fiction and narrative nonfiction, and I would bet, just like Pressbooks, the vast majority of people using this are publishing ebooks because it just makes sense. Here's the Vellum interface. It's actually very clean. And you can see they're showing on the right there a preview of what's being composed in the left-hand window on a ebook reader screen rendering. So you can see exactly what you're going to get. This is true WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And there are a lot of controls here for spacing and things like that. But you can see, again, this is basically fiction or narrative. In this case, this looks like fiction or narrative nonfiction. It's just really straight narrative with some ornamentation and basically paragraph breaks and chapter breaks. That's about it. Now, here's a different kind of solution. This, and I will admit, this is my company, but we are really the only vendor of this particular solution, so I was forced to include it. But this solution isn't software, proprietary software, or a web application. In this case, you actually download a file that's a template file. And these templates open in Microsoft Word, which most people already own and know how to use, or Apple Pages, or Adobe InDesign, which is actually a professional level typesetting and composition tool. So in this case, you're just licensing the rights to a file. And as you can see here, again, the vendor is showing you that you could produce a beautiful looking book that will translate into a print book. It'll also translate easily into an ebook from the same template. So this is a really good solution. And you can see that the kind of books you can create. This is a fiction layout that was modeled after a book by the British author Virginia Woolf. And you can see it has some nice features that you would find in a well put together novel, with that big drop cap and the running heads on the pages. So this is very popular, and the reason that these tools are popular, Pressbooks and Vellum and book design templates, book templates, is because they put the power and the ability, they empower the author to actually do your own typesetting and layout in a fairly simple way. For instance, I'm most familiar with the templates, but I've been told that you can actually lay out and format your book, if it's like a novel, fairly simple, in basically a few hours, and you're finished. And you would end up with a book that is industry standard and good looking. So you wouldn't have to worry about whether you put it together properly or not. And you'd be ready to go to press or upload to your print-on-demand vendor, or go upload your ebook to various ebook retailers or distributors. So that's very cool. And the availability of these tools has been a huge factor in the growth of self-publishing, because when we make it easy to do, then more people will do it. And in fact, to be honest, if you just wanted to publish a book on Amazon, an ebook, you don't even need any of these tools. If you have Microsoft Word, you could format your book carefully and upload it directly to Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing facility, which is their interface for authors. And they will translate the book into an ebook format for you, and bingo, in a day or two, you'll be up for sale on Amazon, the biggest book retailer in the world. So that's very cool, and that is why so many people are publishing books. Now, I asked you to pay attention while we were looking at the different sites and the tools and the kind of books they were showing on their site, and I found this little notice on Pressbook's site, and you see it says in the highlighted part, Pressbook's bread and butter is novels and nonfiction. That's exactly what I was saying. Now I'm going to ignore the fact that they've got some pretty egregious typos in here, and I really think they should proofread their site a little bit better. But the fact of the matter is that Pressbooks, Vellum, book design templates, all of them, their bread and butter is novels and nonfiction for all the reasons I've been describing. There's very little formatting. Everything is one solid flow of narrative, even if it's occasionally interrupted by a photo. It's still just a flow of paragraph, 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 and that's about it. You break for a chapter, and then you go back, paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. So the problem is, what if you need something more than that, that won't do it for you? Then you need a professional quality tool. And by that I mean actual graphic design software. And the two most commonly used in the publishing business are Adobe InDesign, which I think is used by vastly more people. And we also have Quark Express, an older program that is still used by lots of people. They're both very capable. They will produce professional quality typesetting, something that is impossible to get with Microsoft Word, and that the easy tools like Vellum and Pressbooks simply do not have the same kind of controls or intelligence built into their typesetting engine. So that's just a fact of life. But there's more to it than good type. I mean, suppose you want to publish a book that looks like this. If you're trying to do a book like this with all these photos, captions, different kinds of formatting, two-column pages with balanced layouts, and these headers that span the page, this would be quite a challenge, approaching impossible. I would not want to try to take this book on in Microsoft Word because you would drive yourself crazy. It's just not meant for that kind of work. So, what else? Maybe you wanted to produce a beautiful full color coffee table book. That is also going to be a problem. Tools like Microsoft Word are not meant to handle high-end graphics and prepare them for printing, whereas professional quality tools like Adobe InDesign and Quark Express, that's exactly what they were designed for. How about this one? How would you like to try and lay out this book in Microsoft Word? Yeah, me neither. And obviously, this is not a layout offered in the gallery at Pressbooks or Vellum, but this is a real project. If you have to lay out something like this, and it does look a little magazine-y, but there are books that look like this too, with all the different images, the overlays, the graphic elements. It's just never going to happen. So it's important to know when you need pro quality tools. And this, as I say, is driven by your marketing plans. If your marketing tells you that this is the kind of book your readers want, then you're going to have to get the tools and the process to produce this particular kind of book. So that's half of the equation, the kind of tool you use to produce your book. Now, the other half of the equation is how to know what kind of formats or what kind of book you're really going to produce. And as I said right up at the top, the most important thing for a book publisher, and that's who you are if you're a self-publisher, is to understand the expectations of your readers. Like if you're writing sci-fi romance, maybe the vast majority of your readers are reading books like yours as ebooks. That's really all they want. Now, it may be once you become a very popular and widely read author, and I sincerely hope that happens to you, then, your fans may start clamoring for print books because they make great mementos or souvenirs. And some people prefer reading print books. But, until that point, you could just easily just publish ebooks and make a real career for yourself. Now, there are also times we want to create really something special, something that's not run-of-the-mill. And again, this goes back to marketing. If you have a real reason to do this, or you think that there's a market for something unusual, then you're probably going to have to look for a different kind of supplier than somebody like CreateSpace, which is the print-on-demand arm of Amazon. So what do I mean by that? Obviously, ebooks are best for straight narratives, like a novel or narrative nonfiction. And to create an ebook, you can use any of the tools that we just looked at. They will all produce ebooks quite competently. And like I said, if you just want to sell on Amazon, you can even just use Microsoft Word. There's really no restriction. Now, if you want to move from ebooks to print on demand, which is a low-risk way to produce print books, but these print books are in very standard formats, standard sizes, and they tend to have a high unit cost. So print-on-demand books are really well suited to simple books printed in black and white, or that just need what I call commercial color. So if you had a book, and I've done a number of workbooks recently for clients where they wanted to use color for highlights, for quotes, for graphics, charts, they wanted to do them in color. That's what I call commercial color. It's more for comprehension, communication. It's not for artwork where it's very demanding. If you want to do a book like with huge color photographs or artwork in it, you really need better tools, and it's not very practical to produce those in print on demand. The pricing of print on demand is really a big factor, and this goes back to the whole marketing question, because part of knowing what book you should be producing is knowing what your readers expect to pay and staying in that range. So if everybody else in your subgenre is selling their books for $3.99 to $9.99, you may not be successful if you launch your book and it's $30, because that's way outside the expectations of your audience. If you have a demanding book, in any way, and I'll show you what I mean in a moment, print on demand is not going to be very good. It's a highly automated system. There's really no special effects available at all. You're just going to get a straight color cover, black and white interior for the most part, printed paperback. That's it. It's very expensive to do hardcovers, print on demand. You can do it, but you need to have a book with a very high retail price. I'll give you an example. I did a very complex textbook for a client, and because it was a textbook, he wanted it done in hardcover, but didn't want to pay the printer, so we did it print on demand. Now, those books cost a lot of money to produce. I believe in the end, the unit cost was about $11. Now, if you're paying $11 for each book, and you're selling trade books, you're not going to make any money. You're just going to either have to charge too much, or you're going to eliminate your profit because the unit cost is just too high. In this case, his retail price on the book, because it was a textbook, was $150 retail. So he didn't care if it cost $8 or $11 or $6, really, because he had plenty of room to do that. But that's a special case. Most of us don't do books like that. So print on demand is very low on investment. It won't cost you hardly any money going in, but each book is going to cost quite a bit. So you have to really understand where your profit is, and that's going to come from understanding what your buyers are willing to pay. Now, the other way to create print books is by offset printing, and that involves a regular one of those big printing presses. And they roll the paper up on a skid full of paper, and they ink that thing up, and they start printing, and Bob's your uncle, they could print 10,000 impressions an hour. And this is how the majority of books sold in the United States are manufactured. Unfortunately, indie authors haven't really figured out this part of the publishing business very much. There have always been indie authors doing offset books, but they are very few. They tend to be more entrepreneurs. Now, if you want to do a book with very high quality color reproduction, if you're looking for an unusual paper stock or a size that you haven't seen before or a different kind of binding, this is what you're going to end up doing. You're going to be talking to a short-run book printer who offers offset printing. In offset printing, you have many, many choices of papers, sizes, formats, and many special effects. Now, of course, the big problem with offset printing is that you have to pay for all the books before the printer will ship them. So this is a big investment, and that means there's a lot of risk. It's really not a good idea for inexperienced indie authors to take this on without the advice of some kind of publishing professional to walk them through it. And that's even more important when you start looking at these special effects or doing very high quality color reproduction, because you will need a professional to help you navigate that, and also to deal with the book printers who they don't speak their own language. It's not the language that you and I speak. Now, one of the great things about offset printing and all the choices they offer you is it gives us an opportunity to create something really special. Like if you've been publishing books yourself for a couple of years, maybe you're getting tired of those print-on-demand paperbacks. You got the color cover, you got the interior, bang, that's it. You could change from 6x9 to 5x7, but there's just not a lot available. Now, if you, and think about people like artists, photographers, people who want to create commemorative editions of books. There are many, many different ways to use these options in offset printing to create a product that is really genuinely different than anything else in the market. Now, before you go into this, and the reason I suggest you talk to a professional is because of that money factor. If you and in offset printing, you have to print, let's say, a minimum of 1,000 books just to get a decent price per book. Unlike print on demand, which always charges you the same rate per page, in offset printing, the more books you print, the lower the per book cost. Now, if you print a book and maybe it's going to cost you $2.50, just taking a figure out of thin air, and you order 1,000 of those, that means you're going to have to come up with $2,500 and pay the printer before you even have sold one book. And that's why you have to be cautious. But depending on the project you want to do, it could be worth it. Now, I had a question from a reader recently saying that they bought a book and they wondered why this big publisher had put out a book with these terrible page trimming. It was all rough. Now, this is actually a special effect that's expensive to do. It's called a Deckle Edge. And you can see in the picture on the right, here's a book with a Deckle Edge. In other words, it's very rough and it hasn't been trimmed off. And the reason for this is the picture on the left. What you're looking at there is a sheet of paper that was handmade in a mold. And the mold is a wire form with a wooden frame, and they dip it into a vat full of paper fiber that's floating in water, and they lift it out, and around the edge of the frame, you can see clearly that the edges are very rough, where the fibers didn't go all the way to the edge of the frame. Now that is a natural Deckle edge. It's actually gorgeous, by the way, and you could use that on an art book. It would be just phenomenal. But that's a kind of special effect you can create, and big publishers today do it all the time. And why do they do it? They do it to books that they want to communicate have a very high quality element to them. Maybe a prestigious author or a really large format hardcover they're publishing that's a front of the list book, and they want to make it special somehow. And hey, even though we're indies, we could do that too if we just know about it. How about another example? This is an example of a book with gilt edges. And you'll see there's gold on the edges of the paper. And it is actually gold, by the way. It's gold leaf that's applied to the edges of the paper. Now, this is very common to see on old Bibles, but there's no reason why it's only restricted to Bibles, and it doesn't have to be. In this case, this is actually a journal. And it may seem kind of over the top decorative, but gold gilding the edges of the page actually has a practical reason, because when that book is closed and all the gold edges are compressed, it becomes kind of a little gold box, and it will keep that book from aging, the paper from aging. The paper will age much more slowly than a book that just has regular cut edges. And maybe you could picture a book like that of your own. How about really fancy bindings? Look at the binding on this book. You can't do this in print on demand. And not only that, the binding has been combined with these absolutely gorgeous end papers. And you can see the pattern on that. This paper is called Florentine paper. It's made by hand. And just so you know, it's kind of interesting. The way they create these very distinctive patterns is by putting different colors of ink into a tray and then combing them with a comb, an actual comb, and a comb specially made for this purpose. And you get this, and then they dip the paper in the ink, and you get this amazing pattern. So, I mean, if you could imagine the kind of book that you could put into this package, this is like a world away from a 6x9 trade paperback with a color cover and black and white inside. I mean, this is a way to create an object, and you could just imagine if you had the market, what you could sell this book for would be quite a bit more. Okay, here's another case. This is actually a picture of my own from my Write Well journals. But in this case, I was producing journals for writers. And you could see, I mean, it's optimized for writing. That's all it's for, not project planning, bullet journals, anything like that, sketching. This is a journal created specifically for writers. So, one of the important things about this is the book has to lay flat anywhere you open it. And you can see it's open here about midway in the book, and it's laying dead flat on the table. That's really important for that kind of book. Now, you cannot produce a book like this in print on demand. They just don't offer that. They only have one kind of binding style. It's called perfect binding. And I don't know if it's perfect, but it's quite adequate. It works great for paperbacks, trade paperbacks. It's by far the most common type of binding used in print book publishing. So there's nothing bad about it. What I'm pointing out is if you want to create something special, if you want to really stand out, then you have to go in a different direction. And here you could see that lay flat binding is going to require something other than print on demand. All right, how about high quality photo reproduction? These are photographs actually by a late friend of mine, Tom Millay, who's a fine art photographer whose photographs are in museum collections all over the world, and he wanted a book that really showed what his photo prints look like. Now that's really challenging because photo prints are capable of amazing resolution, whereas printed books, we print color pictures like this with ink that's blue, red, yellow, and black. So we're kind of making it up, all these colors. So we had to find a printer who could really reproduce his photographs perfectly. And to do that, we needed a specialized offset printer. And that's what we got. Now, here's something that might appeal to people. On the left, you see a special edition of Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. And you'll notice that this edition was published without a jacket, the paper dust jacket. Instead, it was published with a slipcase. Now, I'm here to tell you that this is actually a collectible item. And imagine if George actually signed these books and then a limited number were produced with the slipcase and sold at a premium price. Let's say $50 to $100. I mean, let's face it, fans are going to buy that collectible book. And they're probably going to prefer that to the regular hardcover. Now, as a book producer, I can tell you that once you take the jacket off, you save the money on the jacket, you put the money into the slipcase, you're not probably even paying any more for this book than a regular jacketed hardcover. And if you are, it's a very small amount more. You do this big stamping, foil stamping on the front. You use the same material, so the book obviously fits the slipcase. And you could do this yourself. One of the advantages of offset printing, by the way, is what we call a split run. And what that means is, let's say we're going to produce 2,000 copies of George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones. So we might take 1,500 of those and make them into regular standard hardcovers or paperbacks. You can bind them either way. And then we pull out 500 of those. We put them in this special blue cloth with the big silver stamping. We put them in the slipcase. We limit it. We're never going to produce this again. So there's only 500 copies. And then we talk George into sitting down and signing them. Now, you could sell that book for quite a bit of money. And yet it didn't cost you hardly anything to produce. You didn't do it as a standalone product. You just did it as a split run. For instance, you can also do a split run and assign, let's say, 1,500 books to be paperbacks and 500 books to be jacketed hardcovers. Now, the jacketed hardcover may cost you $1 more to produce, but you're going to be able to sell it for about $10 more retail. That's why publishers love hardcovers. And of course, in traditional publishing, if your book is published in hardcover, it may stay in hardcover for a year before a paperback is ever issued. That's because the hardcover, when it's available, is much more valuable. Now on the right, we have a box set. We've become used to seeing these in Kindle and other ebooks where authors put together a bunch of books or a bunch of authors come together and make up a set. Here I'm showing you an actual boxed set in a slipcase of books by one author. And these are by the French author Daphne du Maurier. And this is 5 of her novels in a slipcase. Now that makes a really attractive offer for any fan of this author's. So what I'm trying to get at here is to show you there are a lot of other ways to publish books. Now, if I created my journals, for instance, which I showed you, and I went through this whole process with the offset printers and having to pay up front. And there are ways to work your way around the risk and the unknown factor of, can I actually recover my money from this? For instance, in my case, we ran a pre-sale, and this was before the journals were actually finished. I had the printer make a prototype. We took pictures of the prototypes. We put up a pre-sale with a very attractive offer where you could save money if you ordered them in advance. And people know me. I have the ability to reach out to tens of thousands of writers. And we had a very successful pre-sale. And we paid the printer's invoice, the last invoice due, from the pre-sale. So I don't want you to be scared away from any of these options by the idea that it's going to cost money. What you have to do is think creatively. And in some cases, these books are created simply to commemorate an event or an anniversary. And you shouldn't shy away from this if you have good planning and professional help up front. So the important thing here is to go back to the very first thing I said. If you understand your market and you know what there would absolutely please them, it would make them really open their eyes and say, wow, I've never seen something like that. I really want to have that. Then you have a great opportunity. So for your standard books, you could do ebooks, your novels, your narrative nonfiction. You could do simple print-on-demand paperbacks. You can use these great tools we looked at. But if you really want to create something different, something that nobody's ever seen before, and something that you can actually sell at a very premium price, this is the kind of thing you want to do. Before I close, I just want to mention that I have a new book coming out in the next few weeks that includes a lot of the advice I'm talking about here. It's called The Book Blueprint, Expert Advice for Creating Industry Standard Print Books. And it has all of the best writing I've done on this subject since 2009. I hope you'll look for it. That's the end of the presentation. Thanks very much for coming. I hope you've learned a little bit about the tools we use to create books, which ones are right for you, and the kind of formats and the method of publishing that you can use. Thanks very much for coming, and I will see you next time.